Hello, hello, hello. How are you? This is Els coming to you from Bemis Crafty Corner. Today we're going to be working on this. Okay, I'm going to be sharing this one with you. And what this is just a. This is actually just a card that I cut out of a double. It's a cardstock pack, and it's double-sided, so I'll have to back it before I can actually use it. But for demonstrations purposes, it works. And what these are is just like giant postcards, and so it had kind of a grungy vintage theme to it, so I just kind of followed that in the ephemera that I added to this to make a journaling card out of it. But what we're going to be talking about today is this piece right here, and that is actually an embossed stamp, So we're going to talk about using embossing in your embellishments as a design element, okay? So I'm going to get out some supplies, and we're going to, get started on this one. Now, if you don't have embossing powder and embossing tools and all of that stuff, don't rush out and get that stuff. And if you have thought about it, let me tell you, if you've got some inexpensive inks and clear embossing powder, you can make any color embossing. I have another video for that. I will link it. But we're going to go ahead and get this one started today. And I'm just going to show you guys, how to use some embossing to embellish on your ephemera. That's the triple E's, right? Okay, I'll be right back. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to need for this one. If you have an embossing buddy. If you don't, a nylon sock with some cornstarch in it works just as good. You're going to want some embossing powder, your Versamark or other watermark stamp pad. It's clear ink. You're going to want your stamp. Now, if you're using a wood block, you've already got that little rubber buffer in there, so you don't need the foam or the rubber piece. But I'm going to be probably using an acrylic stamp on a block. So I've allowed this stamp to rest, and then I've placed it on my block. And I'm using a bigger block so you guys can see this. Normally I would go with a smaller block, but I want everybody to be able to see what we're doing. So we're using a bigger block, and I have my stamp on there, and I'm going to use my rubber as a backing. I've done a swatch of a couple of different color embossing pieces here so I can figure out which one I like. A brush to clean off any excess embossing powder. The project that I'm going to be embossing, and a piece of paper to catch my embossing powder. And I do it all in a box, and that way I make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So let's start with deciding what color we're going to be using. And I think this is too yellow. Don't like that. That's too red. I like this. This works. Yeah, that works. Okay, so we're going to use this color right here. Make sure I got the right one. Yes, I do. All right, so you're also going to need your heat tool, okay? Now, if you have never embossed before, the most important thing to remember is that this project's going to get hot because your heat tool is hot. So, you want to be able to keep your hands out of the way. So if you're using a smaller piece where you can't, hold it here and emboss up here, you're probably going to want a pair of tweezers or pliers or something to hold this, okay? So I'm going to decide where I want to put my flowers, which I think is going to be like right here. So I'm just going to hit that with my embossing buddy a little bit and just kind of rub it around there, and that just takes off any static and makes it so that the excess embossing powder doesn't stick, okay? And then I'm going to place my project onto my rubber mat, open my Versamark, and I'm going to ink up my image. And then I'm going to place this right where I want it. And I'm going to press it down firmly and just let it set for a second. Make sure that I get it nice and applied. And then I'm going to open up my embossing powder. Over here over my paper. And I'm just going to pour my embossing powder on. And then I'm going to put the excess back in the jar. Because, you know. And then I'm just going to kind of flick it off a little bit. There's my image. And then I can use my paper to put my embossing powder back. Embossing powder, 1 jar of embossing powder will last you a lifetime. Unless you emboss every single day, you know? Alright, so I'm going to get this out of the way for the moment. Close this up. This out of the way. I'll clean this stamp up later. This out of here. Just move that out of the way, and then I'm going to just look at this, make sure that I don't have any stray powder anywhere that I don't want it. And then I'm going to get out my embossing tool. Now this is going to be loud. I apologize. So I'm going to tell you beforehand what I'm about to do. I'm going to heat up the bottom of the paper first, and then I'm going to emboss the top, okay? And that just makes it so that the paper doesn't curl. So get my tool warm. Come up from the bottom just to heat the paper up, warm it up. And then I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm going to move the embossing tool the whole time. And you'll know when it's embossed because it changes depth of color and it gets glossy, okay? Now don't touch it because it's hot. You want to let it sit for just a minute to cool down, and as soon as that's cooled down, I'll be right back. All right, so once that's dried, you know, it's cooled down, you can use any medium that you want, okay? I'm just going to squirt a little bit of water on my board, and I have a brush here. And I'm going to be just using an ink pad. And I'm just going to add a little ink to a damp brush, and I'm just going to paint this in. And just remember, use anything that, you know, is okay with your underlaying. So, you know, don't put down an ink and then use, like, you know, your alcohol inks on it and think that it's going to work if you have, you know, you're using a water ink as your base or one of these distress inks, because that's not going to work. You could also color it in, you know, if you wanted to, with glazed pens or gel pens, or you could just leave it. You know, you don't have to color it in at all. All right, so I've got that done, and I'm going to bring it up here so you guys can see. So I just added a little bit of pink to the flowers, and I'm probably going to add a little bit of green to the leaves on this, and I'm probably going to be doing some stamping up here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then I'm going to come back and show you what this looks like when it's all finished, and I'll be back in just a moment. All right, here it is, all done. So I rounded the corners, I did a little inking around the edge. I'm going to do a little bit more up here, I think. And I want it to look a little more even. Okay, so I did another embossing here to put the sentiment on. That's always a good way to add it. And, you know, the embossing that we did together, with this one, all I did is, you know, I just colored it in with a little watercolor. And I certainly could go back and add even more if I wanted to, add more flowers in here, whatever I wanted to do to bring this up. The whole idea here is use your stamps and your embossing powders to create backgrounds and bases for your work. If you had clear embossing powder and you used a larger embossing stamp and you just stamped it on the whole paper and embossed the whole thing with clear embossing powder, when you moved it, you would see what's underneath it, but just to look at it, you wouldn't necessarily see that. So it would add some visual interest to your project. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have for you today. If you're new here, you know the drill. Like me, ring my bell, share me with all your friends. If you want to know what's going on the channel, check out the community tab here on my YouTube channel, or join my Facebook group. There's a listing on both in channels, you know, both spaces, that tells you everything that I've got going on and coming up. And I look forward to seeing you in the future. Until the next time, stay well, my friends. Bye-bye.